Welcome to this explainer. So let's just jump right into a really fascinating paradox embedded in Indian labor law. We're looking at your status as an employee after you've actually been terminated. I know, it sounds like a total contradiction, right? I mean, how can you be fired yet legally still be considered a worker? Well, today we're going to unpack exactly how that works under Section 2ZR of the Industrial Relations Code of 2020.
Just to set the stage here, imagine getting fired from your job. Naturally, you're upset, and you genuinely believe the termination was completely unjust, so you want to take legal action. But then, your former employer tries to exploit this seemingly logical loophole. They go to the authorities and say, hey, this person can't sue us or raise an industrial dispute because, well, they aren't our employee anymore. It sounds like the ultimate catch-22, doesn't it? We are tackling this exact misconception today. So the core question becomes, can a person whose dismissal literally led to a dispute still be treated as a worker to fight that very dispute?
And the definitive, clear-cut answer under the Industrial Relations Code of 2020 is a resounding yes. You absolutely do not lose your right to fight just because they took away your badge. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start with the post-termination question, explore how the law creates a legal fiction, break down the 4 types of termination, look at the 2 categories of disputes, and finally, outline the strict limits and exclusions of this rule. Section 1. The post-termination question. Fired, but not silenced. Ordinarily, in the eyes of everyday common sense, a worker absolutely ceases to be an employee after they're dismissed or retrenched. That's just a fact of life. But think about the legal implications of that reality for a second. Without a specific provision like Section 2ZR, an employer could legally argue, well, the person is no longer employed, therefore they're not a worker, and they cannot raise an industrial dispute. This creates a massive, glaring injustice. I mean, an employer could simply fire someone specifically to strip them of their right to legally challenge their poor treatment.
Which brings us to Section 2, creating a legal fiction. It's essentially the law's reality distortion field.
What's really fascinating here is this legal concept of a legal fiction. In legal terms, a legal fiction is basically an assumption, a deliberate provision created by the law that accepts something as true for a very specific purpose, even if it isn't strictly true in objective reality. So the Industrial Relations Code deliberately creates this fiction to ensure an employer absolutely cannot defeat a worker's legal remedies merely by the act of terminating their employment. Let's look at the actual text. Section 2ZR explicitly states that the definition of a worker, quote, for the purposes of any proceeding under this code in relation to an industrial dispute, includes any such person who has been dismissed, discharged, or retrenched, or otherwise terminated, end quote. This brilliantly illustrates that, on paper, at least in the eyes of the tribunal, the individual absolutely does not lose the status of a worker as long as the legal dispute directly concerns that termination. Moving right along to Section 3, 4 types of termination. Let's see how the rule applies in the real world. The code practically applies this legal fiction to 4 very distinct types of job loss. First up, if a factory worker is dismissed for alleged misconduct, they actually remain a worker while they challenge that dismissal. Second, if an employee is discharged on the grounds of, say, medical fitness, they continue to be regarded as a worker for that dispute. Third, we have retrenched workers. Think of people let go because a company hit financial difficulties and had to reduce its workforce. They also remain workers for the proceedings. And finally, we have a catch-all, otherwise terminated. This is a broad phrase that makes sure to cover things like termination simpliciter or the non-renewal of a contract. Basically, the law makes absolutely sure all bases are covered here. Section 4. 2 categories of disputes. Recognizing distinct legal situations. The law recognizes 2 distinct situations where this legal fiction applies, so let's compare them. Category 1 covers workers who are fired as a consequence of an already existing industrial dispute. A classic example from the source material is workers who participate in a strike connected with a labor dispute, and then the employer dismisses them because of that participation. In that scenario, they remain workers for the proceedings. On the flip side, we have Category 2. This covers persons whose dismissal or retrenchment itself led to the dispute. In this case, the firing is the inciting incident. A worker is let go, and that very dismissal becomes the core subject matter of the industrial dispute. In both of these categories, the law extends its protective umbrella. And that brings us to our final section, Section 5, strict limits and exclusions, the boundaries of the legal fiction. Now, the crucial point to understand here is that this legal fiction is not a magic wand. The terminated person is not treated as a worker for all purposes indefinitely. The status is highly limited. It's exclusively for dispute-related proceedings. The actions allowed are things like raising the dispute, going to conciliation, tribunal proceedings, and adjudication. You can absolutely make claims for reinstatement, back wages, or claims arising from a legal termination. But, and this is a massive but, it does not automatically restore your employment status outside of the context of the dispute. You can't just swipe your old keycard, walk into the office cafeteria, and demand a coffee because you're legally a worker. The status only exists inside the bubble of those legal proceedings. This brings us to a really critical condition before you can even attempt to use this legal fiction. The big question is, were they actually a worker to begin with? The provision explicitly says any such person, which means you must have originally satisfied the basic statutory definition of a worker before you were fired. If you were excluded from the definition from the outset, say, for example, you were employed mainly in a managerial capacity, an administrative capacity, or if you were a supervisor drawing wages above the statutory threshold, you are totally out of luck here. Being unjustly terminated does not magically convert an excluded high-level manager into a protected worker under this specific code. The foundation just has to be there first. Let's summarize what we've learned by looking at the key takeaways from the source document itself. Ultimately, Section 2 ZR of the Industrial Relations Code of 2020 is a vital, deliberate safeguard. It ensures that the very act of termination does not extinguish an individual's basic right to invoke labor law remedies. By creating this limited, purposeful legal fiction, the law ensures that employers just can't pull the plug on an employee to escape accountability during a dispute. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative thought to consider. We've seen how beautifully this legal fiction protects statutory remedies on paper for traditional job roles. But does it go far enough to protect vulnerable employees in today's rapidly changing modern corporate landscape? With the massive rise of gig work, shifting contracts, and super complex management titles, will the definition of who was a worker to begin with actually keep up with the times? I'll let that sit with you.